So next we have Jim Penman. You all know him. He's been one of the biggest spokespeople for the business. I don't really need to introduce him much more than that because we do it all in the interview. So here's Jim Penman. So we're here with Jim's from Jim's Mowing. Now, Jim actually did a segment on the RDA show, I think the second week, because you were one of the only really well-known businessmen that were standing up for the inconsistencies in the rules and the regulations. And you also have just under 4,000 franchisees Australia-wide, most of them worldwide, and most of them in Australia. So you've obviously been a huge voice for small businesses, and I think it's given small businesses, some feeling of comfort that you're standing up for them. There's a letter that you've done recently, and I just want to pick apart a few points of it and just have you comment on it. So the first sentence is, the only solution to the crisis facing Victoria is that you remove Daniel Andrews as Premier and that you do it now. That's a very, very strong way to start the letter. Can you elaborate on why you think that's so important?
Because the Premier's he's stuck. He's taken a certain kind of a line and he's staying to it and he won't shift because I think he sees it as political weakness. Look, the typical example of this is when he originally came up with the stage 4 regulations. It specifically allowed sole operators to work alone. There was no question. That was right at the heading. It was a very detailed, obviously done with expert health advice, about 6 pages, sole operators working alone, clearly okay. A week later, the Premier goes on a news conference and says, oh, you can't get your lawns mowed or your house cleaned. Now, why did he say that when his own regulations said the opposite? Because he didn't know his own regulations, clearly. So he's now got a situation, he's got expert medical health advice to say it's safe to operate, but he himself has made a statement opposite at a press conference. Now, a man of integrity and compassion and decency would clearly say, look, sorry, I made a mistake. But no, I can't be seen as weak. I can't be seen as backing down. I'd rather throw tens of thousands of the most vulnerable Australians out of work.
And your franchisees, do they get funding or help from the government at all?
No, there's no help because
no JobKeeper, no job seeker.
Well, they get the dole, whatever that is.
Oh,
they get a fraction.
But that's not enough to support a family.
No, of course not. And actually, what makes it worse is we've got some franchisees who are actually on bridging visas, like student visas and so forth. They've got nothing. We've got one poor girl in Dogwash who's actually been asking her neighbours for handouts for leftover food, for example.
Wow.
We've got a GoFundMe within gyms where we're supporting her. Some of us are lending her money and stuff. And I've said to her if she gets evicted, which is quite a possibility, she can come and stay at our conference centre and we'll work out some way to feed her. I mean, it's at that level. It's appalling the suffering that's going on.
Jim, you raised an interesting point. We have an unfolding humanitarian disaster, is what I'm starting to see. That's the real problem here. Things like you mentioned dog washing. You have a dog washing service, right?
Yes.
So we've just seen recently that you're allowed to now have dog washing if you have a building, but not if you're mobile. Most of your operators would be mobile.
Yes, they're all mobile.
What is the logic, besides getting Andy Medic's vote for the state of emergency, what's the logic behind allowing one and not the other?
Well, there's no logic to it at all. I mean, if you try and understand health, what they're actually saying is, okay, if you've got a service where you've got 5 or 6 people working together in the same building, that's fine. That's okay. There's no danger to health. Do the exact same thing, one person by themselves, that's an extreme. The health experts, he actually said, the health experts have said this is not safe. I mean, who on earth would believe that sort of crappy lie? Everybody knows it's a bribe to Andy Medic. And all I can say is that I don't blame Andy for looking after his people, but it's a pathetic offer, little dribble of a bribe to give this man dictatorial powers over the Victorian economy for the next 6 months.
This is what I don't understand. We are having absurdities like the dog washing situation, whilst causing through it a humanitarian disaster, as I said. You have, a few thousand franchisees here in Australia.
Yes.
Most of them are not available to get, the JobKeeper or some kind of support. I imagine that you've told us one story. I imagine there's many, many stories of these people going to the wall. What are we going to do?
Well, it's terrible. I personally know of 2 franchisees who've actually got family members attempted suicide. One of them's been it's just the suffering, the grief, the frustration, I get it every day, all the time. The Premier doesn't see any of this. The Premier is so locked away behind his walls. He has no idea. I don't know if he'd care if he did. But the suffering is absolutely appalling, the madness. I mean, everybody knows suicide attempts are up 30%. Alcohol consumption, you get this domestic violence. I see it, I hear these things. It's grim, it's really awful, it's very hard to take.
How are you holding so much on your shoulders? You got all these franchises, cheeses going through this. Are you okay?
Look, personally, I'm fine. My income is a little bit down, but still, we're still profitable because I've got so much interstate income. My family's got a nice big house with a big garden. I've got plenty to do. I'm running a business. I'm very fully occupied. Personally, I'm fine. It's the weight of my people that really is hard to take. It's like carrying a giant load on me, and you can never even for 1 minute forget about that. It's awful.
So, you have been a saviour in some ways to so many of your franchisees because you've given them an income, you've given them a lifestyle, and most of the time you're like, you're being able to support them, and now you're having to carry the weight of their emotions and their lifestyles falling apart. It must be quite a contradiction to what you're used to.
I must say, my franchisors, we have a system of franchisors who look after franchisees, have been fantastic. Their income is completely stopped. There are no fees at all, but they're still ringing franchisees regularly and saying, how are you going? Because they're unaware of the mental health issues. We're very concerned about mental health in gyms, even before this crisis. We had a terrible situation a couple of years back where one of our people went crazy, killed their 3 little girls and their wife, and it was very, very upsetting. We've set up this system of mentors, so that franchisees can volunteer to look after other. They're not paid; they just help others.
It's great you had that in place before this.
Yes, we have all kinds of things. We send them stickers, fridge magnets with with all the emergency numbers. We have all kinds of. We have all franchisors get mental health training these days to help franchisees with problems. So it's been an issue in the past, and now with this, it's just gone through the roof. I don't think they have any idea of the mental health issues that have come out of this, and it won't be short term. This will be long term. It's not just the financial problems, it's the health problems. And other kinds of health problems. I know I got an email yesterday from somebody, basically the woman's had a terminal cancer. Now she's been battling and fighting it out, but just the kind of struggles to try and cope with what's going on at home, with her husband out of work, with having to have homeschooling of children, and she's got these cancer issues and stuff. I mean, none of this stuff gets into the media, but the suffering is appalling.
Jim, I have to thank you for coming on here, but not just being on here, but for being one of the only business leaders who are speaking out, because I know you copped flack for coming out for this, and I know you've been misrepresented in some ways. But the fact that you're willing to stand up for what your people and for the rest of us is incredible. Is there anything that you want to say to the people out there? We've got a lot of people watching. What's your message to them? I know you're telling Dan needs to resign, but watch the people hear from you right now.
The best thing anybody can do, the only people who can solve this crisis, this problem, is the Labor members of Parliament. And I say anybody who has, especially if they got a Labor elector. I'm in a Labor elector. I've got the Deputy Premier as supposedly my MP. He doesn't represent me in any case. I can tell you that. And I've written to him. Everybody should write to their MP and say, and especially people whose minds has been changed, to say something like, "Look, I've been a Labor voter all my life, but if you don't do something to listen to it and help people, then I'm not going to vote for you again." If people can say, "I was thinking I'm a swing voter, but if this goes on, I'll be Liberal next time." I mean, if people can pressure their MPs, they're the only people that can solve this crisis. My latest letter is written to them personally, directly. And I know there is a movement because they're running scared because the opinion polls are running against them.
Yes.
And the Premier cannot change his mind. He is stuck. He's a man. He's a he-man. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to listen to all these, whinging sods. I'm going to take the hard line. And he'll destroy the state if he goes on like this. So only the MPs can control him. And listen, they've been cowed for years. He controls that party. He's crushed them totally. There's not one voice can stand up to him. But I hope these people, and I know many of them are decent people. I know they went into politics.
That's what we're talking about. They've got to be human beings too. So how are they crushed under this weight of Daniel Andrews.
And I'm sure they listen to their constituents to a certain extent. I know there is a movement out there, and I'm just hoping these people can be made to listen, because there's council elections coming up too. And at the way things are going, I believe the Labor Party is going to be crushed in that, because people are so fed up, they're so angry. And they're aware of this kind of issue. And then you've got the federal election coming up. And then, I know it's 2 years, but there's a state election coming up. They've got to be thinking about their own re-election prospects, because the way things are going, Labor's going to be wiped out in this state. They've controlled it for so long, basically ever since Kennett, really. And people will not forgive and not forget.
We won't let them. Sorry, I mean,
Monica
RDA,
sure.
RDA, Reignite Democracy Australia, will be on this bandwagon the whole way along. Trust me, our members they're really active, so
look,
we
I
will
can
make
tell you,
sure.
for myself, look, some years ago, the Liberal Party asked me to run some fundraisers and so forth and to give them some help, and I said, no, look, state election is not really important, state politics is not that important. Let me tell you, in 2 years' time,
Jim,
in 2 years, I had no idea, I had no comprehension of how damaging having the wrong government at the state level, how much power they have. In 2 years' time, I'm going to be throwing everything I possibly can to make sure we've got a decent government in this state. The question is whether there'll be much of Victoria left. Tell you what, I would emigrate myself. I mean, honestly, I would leave to another state if I could. We're locked in, my staff, my family, everything else. But goodness, and I know people are saying this. They're saying Victoria's not the place to be anymore.
No, it used to be the most livable city in the world. It's become the least livable. Well, not the least. That's an overstatement. But it's become not very fun.
I wrote a letter yesterday, actually, a pleading letter with the WA government, because one of my franchisees wants to move across to Perth. I mean, this is so common. They can't work here. We don't know what the future is. Let's go. There's plenty of work in Perth. So I wrote them a letter to the authorities saying, please, can you let this guy and his family in? He's a great franchisee. He's got a 4.9 star rating. You know, there's plenty of work for him. He's going to be looked after when he gets there. Please let him in. I mean, this is going to happen.
But we don't want to lose people. We don't want to lose people.
No.
I think it's too late for many. But look, there you have it from Jim. That's what you need to do. If you are interested in pushing this through, is to contact your Labor MP and say, look, I can't vote for you if you keep doing this. So this is a man with a lot on his shoulders, and we appreciate having him here. Thank you, Jim, for coming in.
Can I just say before, I know you just finished him off and stuff, but I just want to ask one more question, and then we can stop. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. If you had, let's say Daniel Andrews was sitting right there, and you had 30 seconds of his undivided attention, what would you say to him?
I would just try and impress on him the disaster that he's inflicting on the state. I would try and convey to him some of the pain that I hear every day, which he's insulated from, and just plead with him to please play sense, forget his pride, and have some sense of decency and integrity, and do something to stop this dreadful disaster taking place.
Thank you, and I think we all agree with that sentiment. Okay, do you want to finish it again? Or?
No, I'll cut that bit at the end.
Will you?
It's only because of the time. We're at 15 minutes.